next with the voluntary commitments as opposed to voluntary commitments, and how we're going to help people through that. There's health insurance parity laws, because a lot of times what was happening is people who did need help, or their child who did need help, they'd go make a claim, my son has this issue, and it'd take a month and a half to get a decision from your carrier about your insurance company whether something was covered. But under existing law, if it was a broken leg, they had to do it in 3 days. So we're going to try and get a little more healthcare parity laws to help get that decision made sooner. And there's also going to be a board created to help monitor these things by the insurance companies. And have no doubt if there is an extra expense, now we're going to add it to your premiums. That's not free money, but that's in a nutshell the mental health part. The gun control thing was obviously the most, not obviously, but it was probably the most difficult, because there's a constitutional amendment in place in the state and the federal government, the state actually being expressly more broad than the federal government, that guarantees everyone in this room, just by virtue of being alive, the right to bear an arm to defend themselves against enemies foreign and domestic. And again, people don't like to hear that, but that is a God-given right under a U.S. and state constitution. That's the law, have no doubt about that. That being said, like every other constitutional right, the state of Connecticut, state of Massachusetts, whomever, federal government maybe, has the right to issue reasonable controls on your constitutional rights to protect public safety, certain important state goals. And that's where the rub comes in. Any of these gun debates, that's where the rub is. Where do you draw the line? And it's funny because a lot of folks, once you've accepted the concept that I can't own a bazooka, you've accepted the concept of gun control. So it becomes, where do you draw the line?
And where do you stop?
And where do you stop? Exactly right. And it's a slippery slope. You go over the cliff and it's a gun, or what?
Where's the language of reasonable restrictions? Because I haven't seen it in either the state constitution or the federal constitution.
It's in constitutional case law for 200 years, starting with Marbury v. Madison.
I've seen it in opinions, but I've never seen the Second Amendment overruled as it stands with no infringement.
That's right. What do we overrule? Of course it has been overruled. Of course not. They couldn't without a constitutional amendment. Couldn't. Absolutely right. Absolutely.
It's down to,
it has.
you're going to leave us with a rock. I mean, how the hell decision just stated that their common arms were allowed because that's by the populace.
Yep, that's right.
So we haven't even seen this bill. I mean, you know what? I'm a little
16 hours of testimony, a 3 minutes piece on March 14th, containing almost every single thing that they advanced last night. 16 hours. You can buy it off of the website of the Connecticut government.
So let me finish what we're doing.
Only 3 people agree that this makes sense. What about the other 400 and something that testified?
I was at some of those public hearings. That's grossly inaccurate. That is grossly inaccurate.
I was there for the whole thing.
You were at the Newtown one. You were at the Hartford. The Hartford one was predominantly pro-Second Amendment. No doubt about it. I wouldn't say it was all 3, but I'd say it's 80, 20, 75, 25. Mine, you're just McKinney here. I'd say the Newtown one was probably a flip to the other side, and then just basic anecdotes. The numbers are the numbers. So that's how the process has gotten to where it is now. So what is happening is John's in charge of everything. He can answer all your questions. John, what we were just going over was we did the budget stuff, and now we've worked our way into what has gone on over the last number of weeks on the 3-part bill and where we're going with it. So I was just kind of running out that process. So what is still happening tomorrow, unless you're going to tell me something differently, is we're going to be voting on a bill that contains those 3
that you haven't read.
Exactly right. So we might not be voting on this thing on Friday.
But you will read it before you vote on it.
I certainly, yeah. I don't know. Probably going to be 100. Probably 100 to 200. Or unless John's got an early copy of it. So, I mean, we could talk about any, obviously you want to talk about gun control, and some of these other gentlemen do too. We could talk about the Heller decision. I'd love to talk about that.
Why wouldn't we want to talk about it?
No. Sorry,
yeah, I just wanted to ask the question, does it seem like, since we're probably calling ourselves the Constitution State, that it sets that precedent, I'm not talking about the content of the proposed bill that will be put before the members tomorrow, because whatever's going to happen in the legislature is likely to happen. but I think I'm wondering whether you would comment on whether it sets a bad precedent to do so on an emergency big bill. I mean, there are lots of things in life that are true emergencies. This seems more of an expedient to basically not deal with the messiness. Obviously, it's messy to have public hearings when the bill is actually in front of people, both for and against. And that's part of democracy. It just seems like a bad precedent to pass something like this so that there are various political overtones. The president planning to come here next week and so forth in your state, that perhaps both of you could comment on that. I mean, obviously, there are reasons why, but I'd like to hear them articulated as to why this is being pushed through on an emergency basis.
Well, I agree with you and disagree with you. I agree that pushing stuff through on an easier basis is a horrendous idea. I hate the idea, I always have. Unless it's a real emergency. We passed an ESERT bill a month or two ago to help get workers' compensation benefits to the first responders in Newtown, because under the current law you have a physical injury, so we did an ESERT bill that expanded it. So that was, that was an appropriate use of the ESERT bill. The ESERT bill here is being used more as a mechanical tool, and John, step in if you think I'm not explaining it properly, to capture all of the public hearings and input. And I mean, this gentleman just held up 16 hours of public testimony. I mean, this is not like this is. Now, the problem is, I'd like to get a final bill and go, here you go.
Right.
Yeah,
we would like to.
We should have other
But what's happening instead, and I'm not defending the process, I'm saying what has happened instead, because I'm not in control of the process, we're in the minority, is that a lot of these bills have been vetted independently. A lot of these concepts have been vetted independently. One shot, one gun. That was vetted independently. That's not in the bill. Just crazy confiscation laws. That's not going to be in the bill. Some of the, insure everybody, ban everything, confiscate, that's not going to be in the bill. Because that stuff is part of your 16 and a half hours that people heard and listened to. So the concept that this is some secret bill and no one's ever talked about is frankly poppycock, because we've been talking about this for hundreds of hours of public testimony, both on school security, both on mental health and on gun control.
The devil's are the details.
The devil is in the details.
We want to see the bill before you vote.
But it's inaccurate to say that, this is being done in the cloak of darkness, because it isn't. I'm not saying that the end product is going to be acceptable to me or anybody else, or to everyone, I should say.
How can you say it's not being done in the cloak of darkness if we can't actually see the legislative bill before it's actually voted on, Senator?
Well, sure, I'll just say, I apologize for coming late. I was up in a Newtown meeting that just took a lot longer than it was supposed to. But I thank John for holding court. Specifically, this is my 15th session in the legislature. There have been ESERT bills put before the legislature for each session I've been there. We did one in December on the deficit mitigation package. We did one in September of 2012 on a jobs package. There was one on the workers' comp fund for the Sandy Hook workers. They have been done routinely on our state budgets by the majority party. They're not bills that we sign. It needs signatures of the Senate President and Speaker of the House. Do I think it's a better way of doing business doing ESERT? No, never have. But I was just going over specifically the task force recommendations on the guns, and every concept that's in the bill had a public hearing this session. And some concepts had more than one public hearing.
And what was the results of the hearing relative to what's being proposed?
The bill that we'll vote on tomorrow is dramatically different than 1076, for example, which had a lengthy hearing in the Public Safety Committee the other day. So in terms of ESERTs, do we like them? No. This bill that we'll vote on tomorrow has had more hours of public hearings than any bill I've voted on in 15 years.
It's more controversial than probably any bill you've ever voted on, too.
Absolutely.
Senator, I respect 100%.
Sorry.
My name is John Forgione, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I respect 100% that you've had to, meet with parents of Newtown victims. I mean, it's devastating, and I can only imagine what you've had to had to deal with. But the rights of individuals are protected by the state constitution and the federal constitution. Just for I'm sure they didn't think of an incident like this, but for incidents like this, when there was mass outcry, emotional outcry, and I'm a law-abiding citizen. There are other people here that are law-abiding citizens, and the last thing we want to be is vilified as maniacal killers ourselves. We're not, and we don't want to be considered felons when this law passes. If there's going to be a pitfall of webs, I can just imagine what's in this bill. You told me it's 200 pages long. There's going to be webs and pitfalls for citizens like me that the state is just waiting to enact so that they can make us felons and take away our right to bear arms. And that's what my biggest concern is that there's a whole bunch of things in here that we have no clue what they will be. And I have the deepest sympathy. I have 3 kids. My concerns, I have 3 children that are in the Easton and Reading school districts, and I want them protected 100%. But you can't legislate the banning of evil. You cannot outlaw evil. And you know, there's a whole bunch of things I would really like to get on the record here. One of the things that I would love to see is that.
Can I just address
Yeah.
that real quick? And then,
All right, you can fire away. Go ahead. But I have a number of really important issues, Senator.
no, wait, look, I came late, but I'll stay here until every question is asked and answered.
Okay.
May not be answered to your satisfaction,
No,
but
that's
it will be
fine.
answered. Let me just say, there are certainly going to be areas in this bill where we disagree. I have never said anything about demonizing anyone in the state of Connecticut, much less law-abiding citizens who exercise their rights under the U.S. and state constitution. The only people I would demonize are killers and others who have broken our laws. I take very seriously as one who went to law school and clerked at our state Supreme Court, the highest decision maker on what our state constitution means, our constitutional rights. And in my 15th session, I voted on hundreds and hundreds of bills. And I don't believe one has ever been overturned by the state Supreme Court. So I don't believe I've ever put my vote on a bill that's been deemed to violate our state or federal constitution. And I don't believe I'll be doing that tomorrow. And we may disagree. I think this will be challenged, and that's a good part of our process. But I don't believe what we're doing is unconstitutional. So I just want to get that on the record.
I respect that you don't believe it's unconstitutional. I mean, I'm sure you're an excellent attorney.
And I also, in my last thing, you're right, we can't ban evil.
What's that?
We can't ban evil. And I'm not using the test that I can look at anyone in the eye and say, I've got 3 kids, you've got 3 kids.
Yeah.
I've protected your kids. And my last point, sorry.
Sure,
This is very clear. I said this to a gentleman, his name from Weston, who shares your opinions.
Yeah.
There is no test about what side you're on this issue relative to whether you cared about those kids in Newtown. And that's a universal thing. And people in Newtown, and families who have kids in the school who cry just as much as others who disagree with this bill, and those who support it. So that's not a relevant issue. Everybody wishes this didn't happen, and everybody here, whether you like the bill or not, would love to have a society where it doesn't happen. So,
but here's the point. The bill should be crafted so that it would potentially reduce the incidence of another violent attack. I mean, that's the ultimate goal.
Well,
unless it's not
to
that,
that
unless
point,
it's political.
And to that point, and I want to kind of capture my mindset, because you guys triggered it when we were talking about,
Right.
as this process has played out on all 3 fronts, in my mind and in public, and I've been on the record, is I will not even consider new gun control regulation in the absence of several things. 1, school security. The other, mental health reform, because those are the 2 most important. And then third, if we're going to look at gun control, it has to have at least some chance of helping the effort, and it can't vilify law-abiding citizens. It can't do that. Now, vilify, I mean, like you're saying, the way this bill is presently being presented, and again, read it, and I'll make sure that's the case. If it passes out on Monday, you're not a felon on Tuesday. That's not what's going to happen.
By January 1st.
Okay, but let me run this out. So over the spectrum of the stuff that got proposed in this gun, in all the gun reform stuff, ridiculous stuff, unconstitutional stuff, stuff that had no bearing, no chance of doing anybody any good. We've been able to winnow out the vast majority of that stuff. And so this is my analysis. I'm not saying you agree with it or you disagree with it, but I say, as it's sort of a scale. I got a good weight over here in this one, I got a good weight over here in this one, school security, mental health, and now, you know, I gotta get some balance over here. As it approached actually having a chance of doing some good, and you know, I'm a gun owner, I hunt, I target shoot, I've had for years. As it became less confiscatory and became non-confiscatory, it became just more of a, frankly, excuse my French, a pain in the ass. I said, you know what? I could start looking at this as something. It's like, if this has a chance of helping, even if it's only, you know, de minimis chance, and it's not illegal, confiscatory, or vilify me or anybody else, I can look at this. Now, one of the main things that's in this bill, and I've seen the emails going around today, like 100 different types of weapons are being banned. Stop. The characteristics are being banned. Specific weapons should not be. There may be a couple in there we'll look at. Regardless, the main thing that I want to see in this bill, and is in this bill, now there's actually two, is a refocus on the trafficking of illegal weapons. Because if we're going to actually look at gun violence, looking at assault weapons is not the place to start. It may be a place to look, but it's not the place to start. The place to start is illegal handguns. It's illegal handguns being trafficked across state lines, straw purchases, all kinds of illegal shipments. We lose as many kids as we did in Newtown every, I think it's 2 or 3 months in this country, as we did on that horrible day. And the fact that the debate just has been on assault weapons, well, some of us have kept our eye on the ball and said, well, let's see what else is in here. So there's actually going to be a refocus and a re-emphasis on illegal gun trafficking. We're actually going to get rid of the early release of violent criminals, the stuff we've been fighting for years. Because I'm saying, listen, first, if you even threaten to vilify a law-abiding citizen, unacceptable. But if you're going to burden a law-abiding citizen, and at the same time, a lawbreaker's getting out early, I'm not okay with that. Well, that's in the bill now, too. So